They say the early bird gets the worm. But proverbs are often written by the people who are already awake. Because there is another kind of person, quiet, intelligent, and often misunderstood, whose mind does not open fully until the world begins to close. Daylight can feel like a crowded room. Too many footsteps. Too many expectations disguised as normal. Too many subtle demands to be quick, polite, responsive, presentable. And then night arrives like a soft curtain. The streets empty. The messages slow down. The air cools. And something inside you finally unclenches. Focus appears, not as discipline, not as a performance, but as relief. So what is it, really? A biological clock that ticks later than society approves of? A nervous system that only settles when it's safe? A hidden grief, trying to reclaim a life that daytime kept borrowing? Or something even more tender than that? This isn't a story about laziness. It's a story about timing, shame, and the quiet psychology behind nocturnal clarity. Let's begin. Music. Daytime often asks for a version of you that is ready on command. Ready to talk. Ready to decide. Ready to care. Ready to smile in a way that reassures other people. Even when you are functional, daylight can still feel like carrying water in a cracked jar, energy leaking through tiny holes you can't patch. A notification lights up. A question arrives. A task changes shape midway. Someone expects a reply that sounds effortless. For some people, this constant contact doesn't just interrupt productivity. It interrupts the self. Because there is a difference between being busy and being continually reachable. And when you are continually reachable, your mind never fully sets down its armor. At night, the armor grows heavy enough to remove. There is something almost animal about it, how the body senses fewer eyes, fewer requests, fewer surprises. The world stops leaning over your shoulder. The air itself feels less demanding. Your thoughts, which scattered all day like startled birds, begin to line up, one by one, calmly, as if they were never chaotic, only interrupted. And that is a strange thing to realize. The clarity was not missing. The conditions were. Some people call this being a night owl, as if it's a cute personality trait. A preference. A harmless quirk. But if your best work happens at night, it rarely feels like a quirk. It often feels like the only hour you can finally be real. Not real in a dramatic way. Real in a quiet way. Real enough to be slow without apology. Real enough to think without being rushed. Real enough to create without being evaluated. Night does not only remove sunlight. Night removes the audience. During the day, even silence can feel observed. Even rest can feel like something you have to justify. Even your personality can feel like a customer service voice you slip into because the world likes it better that way. And then nighttime comes with a different texture. Privacy. Privacy does something to the human mind that is easy to underestimate. It loosens perfectionism. It softens self-monitoring. It reduces the small, invisible, "Am I doing this right?" that can drain the energy out of everything. So night becomes more than a time on a clock. Night becomes permission. But relief always has a shadow side. Because when nighttime is the only place where you can focus, daytime starts to look like proof that something is wrong with you. And the mind begins to ask questions that sound practical, but are actually painful. Why can't you be normal? Why do you wake up feeling behind, even before you've begun? Why does your intelligence arrive late, like a friend who only visits when everyone else has gone home? Somewhere in those questions, shame begins. Not loud shame. Quiet shame. The kind that makes you hide your natural rhythm like it's a flaw. And for many people, that shame didn't begin in adulthood. It began much earlier, when quiet was rare. In some childhoods, the day belongs to other people. A parent's moods. A household's noise. A sibling's needs. A school's demands. A constant sense of being watched, corrected, measured. Even in homes that weren't bad, many children learned one thing clearly: Daytime is when you are needed. Nighttime is when you are finally left alone. So the nervous system adapts. A nervous system raised around unpredictability doesn't relax when the sun rises. It scans. It anticipates. It stays half awake even while awake, like a guard who never fully sits down. And then, after dinner, after voices thin out, after lights go dim, the house becomes less complicated. Night becomes the first time the body feels safe enough to exhale. A child doesn't always have language for this. A child just feels it. The silence tastes different. The air feels softer. Even the floorboards seem gentler. And the body memorizes it. Later, in adulthood, you may not remember why night feels safer. You only know that it does. You only know that your mind stops bracing. You only know that you can finally hold a thought without it being interrupted by the sensation of being observed. That is how some people become nocturnal without deciding to. Night is not chosen like a hobby. Night is inherited like a pattern. This is why a late working person often doesn't look like someone chasing pleasure. They look like someone trying to find a stable shore. Because stability is not only about circumstances. Stability is about how the nervous system experiences time. Some people experience morning as bright, clean, possible. Other people experience morning as a spotlight. And spotlights can trigger something ancient, the need to perform. So yes, night can be a sanctuary. But sanctuaries can become complicated when they are the only place you feel like yourself. Because then the daytime becomes a mask. Not a dramatic mask. A functional one. You show up. You answer messages. You sit in meetings. You talk in a voice that sounds awake enough. You drink something caffeinated and hope it can replace the missing hour where your brain normally switches on. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it almost works. But almost has consequences. Performing wakefulness is not the same as being awake. It is a quiet acting, minute by minute, until the day ends. And the body keeps track of every performance the way a river keeps track of sediment. Slowly, accumulating, invisible until it becomes heavy. And the heaviness often turns into self-suspicion. Maybe you're just undisciplined. Maybe you're avoiding responsibility. Maybe you're weak. But there is another possibility, less insulting, more accurate. Maybe your timing is real. Inside the brain, there is a circadian system coordinating when sleepiness rises and when alertness becomes available. For some people, that internal timing runs later. Like a clock set to a different city. This is where the difference between morality and biology matters. Because a delayed rhythm is not automatically a character flaw. There is even a clinical framing that describes a stable late sleep pattern, delayed sleep-wake phase disorder, where a person's sleep timing is shifted later by 2 or more hours from societal norms, while sleep quality can be normal once sleep finally occurs. It can be confusing because it can look like insomnia, and it often becomes a problem when it clashes with work or school demands. That doesn't mean every night worker has a disorder. It means something softer. The body does not always obey social clocks. And yet society often talks as if it should. Just go to bed earlier. Just wake up and fix it. Just stop making excuses. But the body is not a machine that resets because someone is disappointed. A late-timed mind can be intelligent, conscientious, ambitious, while still feeling foggy at the hours when the world expects sparkle. And when your best self arrives later, the world can treat that best self like it doesn't count. This is how timing becomes shame. And shame becomes a second exhaustion layered on top of the first. Because you're not only tired, you're also defending your legitimacy. You're trying to prove that you are capable, in a world that only recognizes capability at certain hours. So night becomes proof. Proof that your mind works. Proof that your focus is real. Proof that you are not what the morning version of you looks like. At night, tasks that felt impossible at noon suddenly become simple. Writing becomes fluid. Problem solving becomes calm. Even your hands move differently, less rushed, less hesitant, less apologetic. And that is where the question gets interesting. Is night productivity a gift? Or is it a refuge from a day that never felt safe? Sometimes it is both. Because night does two things at once. It lowers stimulation. And it lowers social threat. Less noise. Less interruption. Less comparison. Less need to be on. For a sensitive nervous system, those reductions are powerful. They can make you feel like a different person. Not because your personality changes, but because the environment stops triggering your defenses. In daylight, perfectionism can feel like a chain. At night, the chain loosens. In daylight, anxiety can feel like a volcano behind a calm face. At night, the volcano cools into rock again. There is a reason nighttime can feel like the only hour your mind belongs to you. During the day, your attention is rented out. Work, family, chores, social obligations. The constant background sense that someone might need something. By the time you finally have silence, your body is already begging to shut down. So you bargain with sleep. Just a little more time. One more episode. One more scroll. One more chapter. Not because you're reckless. Because night feels like the only place you can reclaim your life. This pattern has a name: revenge bedtime procrastination, described as intentionally staying up late to enjoy personal time even when you know it will hurt your sleep, often when people feel they have little control over their daily schedule. The word revenge sounds sharp, but often, the emotion underneath is not anger. It is grief. Grief that the day didn't belong to you. Grief that your body worked like a tool and not like a home. Grief that the only hours that feel like yours are the hours you're supposed to surrender to sleep. So bedtime starts to feel like surrender. Sleep becomes the moment you hand your life back to morning, back to alarms, obligations, brightness, speed. And if morning has always felt like pressure, then sleep begins to feel like stepping toward pressure. That is why some late nights are not a habit problem. They are a protest written in yawns. And yet, even protests have costs. Because there is a delicate truth that needs tenderness. Not all late living is neutral to the mind. A large Stanford medicine study looking at sleep timing and mental health in nearly 75,000 adults reported that staying up late, regardless of whether someone identifies as a morning person or an evening person, was associated with higher rates of mental and behavioral disorders. The article notes a recommendation of lights out by 1 a.m. and discusses the mind after midnight hypothesis as one possible explanation for why late-night wakefulness might shift mood, judgment, or risk-taking. Source: that doesn't mean your night self is wrong. It means the deeper the night becomes, the more isolated life can become, sometimes quietly, without noticing. Fewer anchors. Fewer social protections. More empty hours where thoughts can turn inward. And if your mind is tender, lonely, or already carrying too much, the quiet can become a mirror that reflects pain more clearly than daylight ever allowed. So the question becomes softer and more precise. Does night calm you, or does it only hide the demands that overwhelm you? Does night make you feel free, or does it make you feel safe from being seen? Because there is a difference between freedom and hiding. Freedom expands you. Hiding protects you. Both can be necessary, but they feel different in the chest. Some people notice it in the way they breathe. In the daytime, breathing can be shallow, like you're saving space for other people. At night, breathing becomes full again, and that fullness can feel like coming home. This is why it is so painful to be judged for nocturnal focus. Because people often assume night work is indulgence. But for many, night work is regulation. Not a trendy word. A human one. Night reduces input. And reduced input allows the mind to settle. Like river sediment sinking when the current slows. And once the sediment settles, you can finally see the bottom. You can finally see your own thoughts without them being distorted by noise and urgency. There is also a social truth that complicates everything. Modern life is built around an early schedule. In the Insider Science transcript about night owls and circadian rhythm differences, the idea of social jet lag is described, where many people are forced into schedules that don't match their internal clocks, creating a chronic mismatch that can affect well-being. Source: that mismatch isn't just about sleep. It is about belonging. Because when your natural rhythm doesn't match the world, you can start to feel like you're always arriving late to your own life. You watch people wake early and look proud. You watch morning routines get praised as virtue. You watch tiredness get moralized. And you may begin to hide the hours when you shine, because those hours don't look impressive in a culture that associates early mornings with worth. So your nighttime becomes private. And private gifts can start to feel like secrets. And secrets can start to feel like shame. This is one of the quiet tragedies of the night working mind. You can be deeply capable, but not in a way that earns applause. And yet, capability is still capability, whether it happens at 7 a.m. or 2 a.m. A clock doesn't decide what is meaningful. A clock only measures what society has agreed to recognize. The deeper psychological truth is this: if you work best at night, you are not necessarily avoiding life. You may be finding the only conditions where your mind can finally meet life honestly, without performance, without interruption, without the sensation of being evaluated. Night can make your mind feel less like a marketplace and more like a library. It isn't empty. It's simply quiet enough to read yourself. And there is something tender about that. Something almost sacred. But tenderness doesn't erase complexity. Because your nighttime clarity can coexist with nighttime loneliness. Your nighttime productivity can coexist with daytime shame. You can love the focus, and still feel grief that your best hours are hidden. And this is where the story shifts. Not toward solutions. Not toward fixing. Toward a gentler kind of recognition. Because recognition is often what the nervous system has been asking for all along. To be seen without being corrected. To be understood without being moralized. To be allowed to exist without defending your rhythm. If the mind truly is an internal clock, then perhaps it deserves the same respect as any other difference, like temperature preferences, or sensitivity to noise, or the way some people need more solitude than others. And if your rhythm was shaped by early experiences, by a childhood where quiet arrived late, then your night focus makes even more sense. It is not random. It is not a flaw. It is a nervous system learning where peace lives. Sometimes peace is in people. Sometimes peace is in solitude. Sometimes peace is in the hours when nobody expects anything from you. So if your mind sharpens at night, it may be because the day has too many hands in it. Too many claims on your attention. Too many silent tests. Too many moments where you feel like you have to be fine quickly. At night, you don't have to be fine quickly. You can be real slowly. And that is why nighttime can feel like belonging. A softer kind of belonging. Not to a group. To yourself. And now, the ending that matters most is not a conclusion. It is a gentle return. Because if you are someone who works best at night, you may have spent years being told, directly or indirectly, that your timing makes you less trustworthy, less disciplined, less mature, less worthy. But timing is not a moral score. Timing is a context. A biology, a history, a nervous system searching for the hour it can finally rest its shoulders. And if there is pain in that, pain that you only feel fully alive when the world is asleep, then that pain deserves care, not ridicule. If this reflection made you feel seen, if parts of it felt familiar in a quiet, unmistakable way, if something inside you softened because it finally had language, you are not alone. There are many people who bloom after sunset, not because they are broken, but because the world finally becomes gentle enough for them to open. If you'd like to stay connected, a subscription can be a soft way to keep this space close, an emotional and psychological place where the hidden corners of the human heart are treated with respect, not judgment. And if you feel safe to share, comments are open, only if you want. Even a single line, even a quiet, "Me too," not to explain yourself. Just to leave a small lantern for someone else who reads in the dark. You deserve gentleness.